Hello and welcome to The Well Online. We're so glad you joined us today. Here's what's coming up this week at The Well.
If this is your first time visiting The Well Online, we'd love for you to fill out a Connect card. Click the link in the description or scan our QR code. Thank you for your continued support of The Well Church. If you have gifts to give today, you can click the link in the description or scan our QR code.
Well, hello, Well Church family. Thank you so much for joining us today. My wife, Miranda, and I and our leadership team are so glad to get to visit with you in this format. We know that today is Serve Sunday. So, for 2020, we began the year targeting 4 Sundays that the vision was we're not canceling church, we are becoming the church. So Serve Sundays, we are in the community, we are doing things, and around mid-March, just before the first Serve Sunday, we know the whole world kind of turned upside down. So full disclosure, every project that we had planned for Serve Sundays, we've had to, like the current teaching series that we're in on Sundays, we've had to recalculate all of those plans. So we are recalculating yet again. And right now, at the broadcast of this pre-recorded video, you are driving up, opening trunks, and we're doing a drive-up grocery drop-off for Center of Hope here in Parker County. Now, if you hopped on and you're in the DFW area and you just heard this news, you can still join us. Come to 700 Willow Crossing East here in Willow Park, Texas. And Brookshire's is just 1 block away. So swing by Brookshire's, pick up the groceries that'll be listed here at the bottom of the screen, and go ahead and join us. And this video will be archived that we're about to show you. It's very important. I definitely want all of you to stick around and watch what we're going to give you, because we wanted to serve you on Serve Sunday in a different and unique way. I recently had the privilege to meet an attorney. His name is Brandon McGee, and he is going to be sharing with us some great practical wisdom and advice about all sorts of financial planning, real estate planning, end-of-life planning, nursing home care, setting up a will, setting up a trust. And, why it matters is this. In the church, we know that Scripture tells us to be good stewards. Essentially, as a believer, we take the mentality that really everything that we've been given is not really ours. It's only ours for a little while. It's only ours to manage and own and to be a blessing, of course, to us and to our family and to our loved ones, but also a blessing to others as well. So we want to be good stewards. And I don't know about you, but having young kids, and can I still call myself young? I don't know. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But I am beginning to have some questions as I get older about how to manage things better. So often in life, it is, if I can use the example, it is the warning light on the dashboard of life that gets our daily and weekly attention first and the most. So today, we're going to talk about those things that, maybe you've been putting off. Maybe you think about, but you're not sure about a next step. So as I mentioned, this is a pre-recorded video that we are broadcasting live, okay? So I've got my notes handy. I'm going to be jotting down a few things, and I know that you will want to do the same. So join us. Thank you. Make some comments. We'll give you some information to connect with attorney Brandon McGee and his office at the end of this broadcast. But certainly now is the time to settle in. After you watch this, watch it again, and just let's learn about some wise advice and teaching concerning our finances, life planning. Would you welcome me and join me in welcoming attorney Brandon McGee? Brandon, it is great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jack. It's great to be here at Well Church.
So tell us a little bit about your personal and professional background and why you like to do things like this.
Sure. So I grew up in Dallas. I'm a DFW native, which I think makes me kind of rare sometimes around these parts. But Grew up in Dallas, and I came over to Fort Worth to the right side of the Metroplex, in my
Yes,
opinion.
you did. Yes, you did.
And went to TCU. So I'm a Horned
Perfect.
Frog, and at TCU I developed a strong liking for the Fort Worth area. But after TCU, went off to law school, and I went to Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Emory University School of Law,
Okay.
and then just loved it out there. Had a good experience, but decided to come home to Texas to practice law. So came back to Texas, and then about 2005, 2006, started my own practice in Fort Worth. And the first 10 years of my professional career, I was doing a lot of litigation, dealing with people, companies who had big problems, and I was helping them to the best that we could sort those problems out through the court system.
Okay.
In the year 2012, so about 8 years ago, I had a series of calamities in my life, and these are the kind of things that we don't want to ever have happen to us, that we think will never have happen to us, but they happened to me and my family. In May of 2012, my wife, at the age of 39, was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer.
Oh, goodness.
And we have twin sons who are now 12. At the time, they were about to turn 4. And my wife, Rita, is a fee attorney with capital title. I was running my law practice. And so this was just a crushing moment in our lives, right? Stage 3 is pretty serious. My wife had to start going through chemotherapy, had to have several surgeries, and really got run through the ringer. But about 35 days after my wife's diagnosis, my father, at the age of 64, was working on July 1st, 2012, in his backyard in Dallas, Texas, in the heat, and had a massive heart attack, completely out of the blue. And unfortunately, it took his life. And so within 35 days, my dad was gone, and my wife had stage 3 cancer. So as a normal person would do, I think, a reasonable person, I started doing a lot of reflecting on life during the year of 2012. And what I determined was that I was getting kind of burned out on what I was doing. I wasn't going to work with an attitude of joy and service. I was kind of going to work thinking, well, I got to deal with all this stuff again, right? So that's when I decided to switch my practice from litigation to estate planning and elder law. And I really love estate planning and elder law because it gives me an opportunity to help set families up so that when these things happen, because, you know, I was telling you before, I hate being the guy that has to come in and give everybody bad news, but we're all going to pass away, right? Some of us are going to have serious illnesses. Some of us are going to become mentally incapacitated at some point in our life. And some of us are going to have to get, in fact, half of us are going to end up in a nursing home at some point before we pass. But I can help set families up so that when those things happen in your family, people have the easiest time possible handling it. The family members who are left to pick up the pieces to deal with the situation can have a really smooth road. And so I kind of had a passion for that. And in the year 2012, seeing what happened to my wife, who, thankfully to God, she's now in October of this year, will be 8 years, no evidence of disease, and she's doing great. Our kids are doing great. So, but I'm in a position now where I'm helping families set things up in their life so that when these events happen, they're prepared and things can go as easy as possible. And so that's why I do estate planning and elder law, and I wake up every morning and I'm excited about it. My staff loves it, and so we just all have, kind of like here with you guys, we have a really good time with it.
Wonderful. Well, good. Well, we can definitely connect you on many levels with
Right.
the TCU, the Fort Worth, and having been through some things, I always like to say we don't really connect to one another through strengths. We connect to one another with what we've been through, and maybe our weaknesses. So,
yes.
So thank you so much for bringing this to the Well Church and to those others that may be just joining us for today.
Absolutely.
So I've got a list of questions here, and I thought we would just take some time and just go down them. And I guess what we want to look at first, why don't we ask you this? What do you consider to be the most critical aspects of estate planning? And those two words together, I wonder how many of our viewers, they think of maybe their their modest dwelling as
Yes.
estate planning. So
Right.
break that down for us as well.
Okay, first off, sometimes I resent the term estate planning, although it's the term we have. It's what I am. I'm an estate planner, because it makes people have an image of, well, I got to be a member of the Bass family, or I got to be a Rockefeller, or Jerry Jones, or somebody with an immense amount of wealth, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is, if you own a house, if you have a bank account, if you have a 401k, it doesn't matter if there's $50 in it or $5 million. You have an estate, right? And so with estate planning, we need to get away from the idea that it's just for wealthy people, because it doesn't matter if, like I said, if you have $50 or $5 million, if you become mentally incapacitated, if somebody passes away, what has to happen is the same legal procedure for everybody. There's not a court, there's not a set of laws for the wealthy in Texas and a set of laws for the middle class and the in-between. So estate planning is for all of us. And there's 3 critical areas that we look at our firm. And again, none of these guys are going to be happy areas to dwell on, but they're things that we want to consider, we want to take care of, and then go about our life and do more fun things, right? But number 1 is passing away, okay? We want our estate to be set up so that if I pass away, if my wife passes away, if God forbid while we're raising our children, we both pass away maybe simultaneously in an accident, we want to have things set up so that things can pass to the next spouse or to the surviving spouse or to the next generation as easily as possible, as smoothly as possible, and as responsibly as possible. Particularly, we don't want maybe an 18 or 19-year-old receiving everything that mom and dad has. Your 401k in the hands of your 18-year-old son is probably going to do more harm than good. Yeah, right. It's not going to go well. So that's number 1, is preparing for passing away. Number 2, we prepare for the possibility of mental incapacity. Okay. Another topic that's not something that we dwell on and not very happy, but 50% of us or more before we pass away will experience mental incapacity. And it could be for 2 hours, when we're 85 years old and then we're gone. Or, some folks, if you look at the baby boomer generation, the tail end of the World War II generation that's still with us, in my opinion, the greatest generation that we've got, they are dealing with a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia. There's memory care units being built all over this area. And so we want to, look at the possibility that could happen to somebody in a prolonged manner and set up to deal with that, okay? Because there's things that we can do through legal documents to set up for that. The third big area we look at, and this is probably not going to apply to a lot of your parishioners, but they might want to be thinking about this as it relates to their parents, is preparing for the possibility of long-term care, assisted living, nursing home stay, memory care units. That is getting very expensive. Here in the DFW, a nice memory care unit, a nice nursing home, you can easily spend $7,500, $8,000 a month. Wow. Okay, so there's different things that we can do in preparation for that possibility, so that we're not depleting a family's estate just because somebody has to go into a nursing home or somebody has to go into a memory care unit.
Okay, excellent. You mentioned 50% or more experience the mental incapacity issues. So let's jump down to that question. Tell us about how to avoid the court system in the event, so that our wishes are done.
Correct.
Through the process, and the state of Texas is not mandating us what to do.
Okay, great question. Okay. So number 1, in Texas, we have what are called the probate courts. Okay. And the probate courts, let me kind of walk that back just a little. Okay. In the larger urban counties, we have probate courts. In more rural counties, which actually Parker County still is considered to be more of a rural county, there's the county court at laws that will control the probates that go through, but they follow the same laws. Okay, but we have the probate courts or the county courts at law that follow the estates code that's passed by our state legislature, and the goal of that is to have a bunch of rules that apply to somebody when they pass away and they need to pass down their estate to their spouse or to their kids, their beneficiaries, and a lot of rules that control what we call guardianship, which is when somebody becomes mentally an adult becomes mentally incapacitated and basically needs a custodian, right, to make all their decisions for them. Now, in the state of Texas in the year 2020, we can absolutely 100% avoid that whole system.
Okay.
If you leave behind for mental incapacity a set of documents called powers of attorney,
Okay.
okay? At our firm, we have 7 that we provide to our clients, so that if I'm in a car accident on 121 or I-20 or I-35 and I'm in a coma and it happens like that, my wife can immediately go to the hospital, make all my medical decisions. She can immediately get my medical records, go get a second opinion from another doctor or another hospital. We have HIPAA laws that normally prevent that. She can put the house up for sale. She can access my retirement accounts. She can do whatever she needs to do to manage that situation. If she doesn't have those documents and I'm on I-30 and I get in a bad accident and I end up in a coma, she's going to be hiring an attorney like me. She's going to be spending probably $6,000, $7,000 going through the probate courts to become my legal guardian. And 6-9 months later, hopefully she'll get the ability to do all of these things. So we can completely bypass all of that if you just have the right documents in place.
And a power of attorney type document, is that different than a will or a or a revocable trust? So let's go into that and let's look at those differences.
So the goal of powers of attorney are they apply to a person who is alive still but mentally incapacitated.
Okay.
So it's real important to remember that when somebody passes away, you can't say, "Oh, look, I have a power of attorney. I'm going to go clean out their bank accounts or I'm going to sell their house." It doesn't work. Okay. Now, if somebody passes away, to pass their estate down, we're either going to use a last will and testament or we're going to use a trust. Okay. The advantage of the trust is that it allows us to avoid the court system. The same court system that we have for guardianship, we have for, there's no prettier way to put this, for death probate. Okay. And so a trust allows us to avoid the court system. A last will and testament sends us through the court system. Okay.
I did not know that.
And so a lot of people think, well, I've got a will, and so if something, in the men, we think we're going to go first. So when I die, my wife can just have everything, and she doesn't have to do anything because it's in the will. No, the will is going to have to go through court, and for your wife to be able to sell the house, to get to your 401k, she's going to have to hire an attorney and go through probate. Now, having a last will and testament is much better than not having anything because it sends you through the court system much quicker and much cheaper. Okay. When you go through the court system without a will, and you don't have a trust, so you can't avoid court, you're going to be paying a lot of money to an attorney. You're going to be spending a lot of time in court. You're going to be subjected to a lot of judicial and government red tape, and there's going to be a lot of micromanagerial control by the judge, by the court system. So that's the worst thing you can do. So much better to have a will than not.
It's much better to have a will than not.
Absolutely.
But it would be better to have a trust.
Yes, in my opinion.
And a will or no or
a trust and a will. So my opinion is
okay.
that everybody should have a will because when you have a trust, you have to put your assets in the trust.
I see.
You have to attach, let's say connect. You have to connect your assets to the trust. We help all of our clients do that. We walk them through it, help them out with it. But I could have a client that's my age or your age, we're in our 40s, and we probably have a lot of things we're going to do in life still in terms of opening new accounts, selling property, buying a new house, you know. And if I have a client that 8 years after they hire me, they open, let's say they get a new retirement account or a new brokerage account, and they forget to connect it to the trust, and they pass away, we want the will there as kind of the safety net to catch it, and then it'll be run through the court system, and the will will send it back into the trust.
Incredible.
So we want both.
Great. Brandon, this is great information. I wanted to ask you, could you clarify, we mentioned wills and revocable trusts, but there's also an irrevocable trust.
Yes.
What are the difference, advantages, disadvantages? What do you see?
Sure, great question.
Thank you.
Number one, the irrevocable trust is not going to be for the vast majority of people, particularly those of us who are maybe middle-aged or young adults. revocable, and let me kind of tell you what a revocable trust is for, and then I'll tell you what an irrevocable is for.
Okay.
A revocable trust, like we said, can help us avoid the court system. Okay, period, end of story. A revocable trust can help us avoid the federal estate tax. Okay, and a revocable trust can help us have a specific distribution pattern that is above and beyond just a lump sum payout.
Okay.
For example, if my wife and I, on her birthday, I'm going to take her out to dinner, and our kids are at home with the babysitter or my mom, and we're drunk driver hits us on the way home and we're gone. What we don't want, like we were kind of talking about earlier, is for when my sons turn 18 to be entitled to our entire estate.
Sure.
Okay. What we do want is for our sons to be to have money to pay their guardian while they're growing up, a certain amount per year. If it's, for example, if it's gonna be my mother, we would want for her to get a certain amount of money per year out of her trust.
Yeah.
Once my kids hopefully go to a college or a trade school or a university, we want funds to be there to pay for that, but we want them to be limited to a certain amount per year. And then in an age of maturity, which I generally think is going to be later in time for boys than girls.
Agree.
That's just been my experience in life. We want for my sons to start getting whatever remainder there is. But we don't want it when they're 18, right?
Agree.
So a trust can really help with that. Now, what an irrevocable trust can do is all of those things I just told you, plus it can protect all of our assets from lawsuits, okay? So you can kind of wall off all of your assets from lawsuits. It can also help us when we're older in life, later in years. It can protect our assets from the nursing home, meaning that we can qualify for Medicaid even though we have money, even though we have assets. We can still qualify for Medicaid if our assets are in an irrevocable trust.
Okay.
Now, there's a downside to irrevocable trust. In my opinion, there's no downside to a revocable trust. There's none, in my opinion. But there's some big downside to the irrevocable, and it's this. Number one, it's irrevocable. You can't get rid of it, period. Number two, you can't change it. If you put your son in there as a beneficiary, and then, God forbid, maybe he, gets into chemical dependency type issues or a terrible marriage or something like that, you can't change it, right? So you're stuck with the terms. Number three, and this is, I think, for a lot of people, the real kicker, and a big part of the reason half the world doesn't have an irrevocable trust, you can't be in charge of it for it to have that power. The power that it has, that it can't be penetrated by a lawsuit. A nursing home can't require you to spend down your assets to them before you qualify for Medicaid. You have to have a third party in charge of it. It can't be you. It can't be your adult kids. It can't be your spouse. You got to pick maybe your brother or maybe an attorney or maybe a bank and trust company. So a lot of people don't like the irrevocable trust unless they have a strong reason for it, because we like to be in charge of our assets, right? So that's pretty much the difference in a nutshell.
Good. This is great. This is wonderful. I'll look at the center camera here. You can see my notes. Maybe you've got as many next steps as I do. But as you mentioned, we don't really know what the future holds for us.
Right.
And it's good to have a plan in place for some clear next steps.
Absolutely.
Well, let me look over my list of questions. I feel like you've given us a lot of good information as far as documents and what to have, and we're all so unique and different.
Yes.
So it's good for each individual to look at the information and then decide for themselves.
Absolutely. Yes.
So a little bit about we haven't talked about the long-term care, and when you shared the figure, some of the long-term care facilities and nursing homes that we would want to be in, should we have to be in them,
right,
are $75, $100 to $8,000 a month.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about the long-term care process in Texas and the different ways that there are to pay for that.
Okay. So long-term care, there's different kinds. And, for those of you who are watching this and maybe you're in your 30s, your 40s, like you and I are, It seems like it's a long way off, and hopefully it is. But you might want to be thinking about this for your parents. And also you might want to be thinking that, well, when we're 80, it might cost $15,000 a year or a month, excuse me, a month. But with long-term care, we have assisted living, which is kind of the beginner to long-term care. And then that's for the folks who have some issues, need some help, but not round-the-clock care. Then we have the skilled nursing homes. Those are for the people that need round-the-clock medical attention, that have very serious conditions. And then we have memory care units, and that's obviously for people that have dementia and Alzheimer's. And so those are the 3 different levels of care. The ways to pay for them, number one, there are some really good insurance products out there. And I'm not going to get way off into that. I don't sell insurance, but we can make introductions to folks, insurance professionals who can help with that. But there's some great policies where they combine life insurance with long-term care. I'm a big fan of those. That way, if you never use the money, if you pass away and you don't go into care, it's not a big waste. Your family gets what you had in there as an life insurance benefit. So there's insurance products that I encourage my clients to look at. Some people are too old, or like my wife, they've had a serious medical issue, and they're not going to be able to they're not going to qualify by health status. Other people, it doesn't fit into their budget. So then for the crowd that maybe they're in their 60s or their 70s and they don't have insurance, they're not going to qualify, they can't afford it, we will then start looking at the irrevocable trust that I was telling you about. The reason we'll look at that is because after it's set up and your assets have been in there for 5 years at least, so there's a 5-year minimum, Medicaid can't count those assets when they're looking at your resources. They have to pretend those are not yours. Those belong to the trust. They don't belong to Brandon McGee. They belong to my trust. So we've had families that they can save, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 and qualify for Medicaid, and that money is there for their spouse, if they have a spouse, and that money is there to pass down to their next generation without because there are many families in Texas. It's happening right now as we speak. There are families that are spending everything they have because dad had a stroke, and they're paying $7,500 a month, and they have no way to pay for it except out of their pocket. So there's planning that we can do. There's also some for veterans. There's some VA options out there potentially. It's something that you guys can come in and talk to me about these things if you want more information. But veterans have other options that us civilians don't have too.
Wow, that's great. I know my wife's grandfather lived a very modest and simple lifestyle, lived in the same house that my wife's mother and 2 brothers lived in. They lived in the same house for 40, 50 years. And yet had lived in such a way that he had long-term care for, goodness, I want to say almost 20 years.
Oh, my gosh.
And still had a wonderful inheritance laid up for his kids, like the Bible talks about. He was definitely a wise man.
Yes.
And so really no matter what stage of life you're in, if you're starting as he did, probably working from a teenager, with that in mind, very natural to him to think that way.
Correct.
For those of us maybe in the middle of life or very close to needing those, and I've often made the joke, there are some assisted living facilities I'd like to move into myself away. They're fantastic.
They look like a Hilton.
Yeah, they're great.
Yes,
they're great.
Some of them are very nice.
And maybe one of them or 2 on the golf course. I could handle that too, right?
Yes.
I could handle that too.
Yeah, there's some very nice ones out there. There are.
So this is really good information. I'm looking over my questions, and I just wanted, I guess, in generally speaking, before we close it out, is there anything that we haven't covered that you feel like is important for us to look at?
A couple things.
Wonderful.
One is at our firm, we have what we call a legacy workbook, and we feel that with estate planning, it is just so hyper-focused on finances, right? And a lot of times that's the 100% focus. And, obviously we all know, we're Christians, we know that we're leaving behind to our families a lot more than just money. Money is important. There's no way around it. And like you said, we need to be a good steward of it. But we're also leaving behind a legacy, right? We're leaving behind experiences in life. We're leaving behind religious viewpoints. We're leaving behind philosophical viewpoints. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have a legacy workbook that we provide to all of our clients. All of our clients get a binder with all their documents in it.
Okay.
And they also get a legacy workbook. So each spouse can go through, and you're basically answering a bunch of questions. So you're not having to just come up with, like, gosh, how do I write a biography about myself? I feel arrogant, right? Or like, I didn't accomplish anything much. What am I doing here? But you just answer a bunch of questions in this workbook, and by doing that, you leave behind a lot of information about your education,
Wow.
sports you played in high school, great experiences you've had, things that are important to you in life. Because when I look up my family tree, most people are just a name and a birth date and a death date, and that's it.
And maybe a picture.
Maybe a picture.
Yeah,
maybe I know a thing or two. But this gives an opportunity so that, whatever craziness is happening in the year, 2350, maybe your descendant can kind of see how things were many, many years before.
Great.
So we think it's important to do that as well. And I also, guys, I think it's important for people in our phase of life, Jack, people who have kids. This is one of those big back burner things here where it's, well, I'll deal with that next month. Let me deal with that next year.
Sure.
Nothing's going to happen to me right now. I feel healthy.
Yeah.
So it's really important to be proactive, make this a priority, and get it done. And the thing is, after you get it done, you can just forget about it for a while. At our firm, every 2 years, our clients will bring them in for a complimentary review. We don't charge them. And they come in every 2 years. How's the family doing? Have assets changed dramatically? Are there any laws that have changed that might impact your plan? And most of the time, everything's good, and we part ways.
Yeah.
But it's real important to get this done and not have it be a loose end that's always hanging out. And I know when you have kids, you're paying for this. You're running to football practice, baseball practice.
There's always something.
It's almost impossible to get my wife and I in the same place on a weekday, right? It's just it's impossible. But here and there we have to do it for things, and this is one of those things where we think it's important to take care of it, and then after that you just have to kind of maintain it, and it's not a big issue going forward.
Wonderful. So your law practice, McGee Law Firm, you have locations here in Fort Worth and also a South Lake location. And
Yes.
And your website is McGeeLawDFW.com.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll put that on the screen for people, and
Wonderful.
we'll put that in the comments as well of the description of today's broadcast. I know that you've got a webinar that you offer through your website. Tell us a little bit about that webinar.
So I've been doing since COVID started, I've been doing a webinar weekly,
Okay.
where I go more into detail about these three main topics that we've been talking about here today, and I break down Medicaid. I break down the probate process in Texas and how to avoid it. I break down all the different powers of attorney. So it's about an hour.
Okay.
And then at the end, we have a question and answer. So if any of you guys want to watch that, just call my office, and they'll tell you how to register for it. It's free. And you can watch it for an hour. You can ask me questions after, and then kind of, if you like what you hear, you can come in and see me. And we always offer our first consultation is always complimentary, so we won't charge for that first consultation, and that's how it works.
Brandon, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed
Absolutely.
this.
Well, church family and friends, thank you for being with us. I want to just point out to visit Brandon McGee, the law firm. Visit their website, and we hear this information. We know that there are 1 or 2 or maybe 5 next steps that we want to take. Pick one next step and just take it. You're going to be a good steward. You're going to be a good manager, and the people that you love and care about are going to be glad of the many daily decisions that you make that have to be made, but they'll be very glad that you took a next step concerning your end of life and ways that would help that passing, or goodness, the things that we don't want to imagine happening, sometimes they will and do happen. Make them easier for your loved ones to manage and take care of. So again, thank you for joining with us today here at the Well Church. We are here every Sunday at 10 a.m., and we would always love if you're unable to be with us in person, if you're not quite ready to be with us in person, join us here Next Sunday, kids programming begins at 9 o'clock, and a weekly service at 10 a.m. God bless you. Have a great rest of the week.